Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a journey into some really profound concepts. We're pulling insights from, well, some fascinating sources. They cover things like biblical prophecy, the whole cyclical nature of existence, and what it really means to find true human happiness or felicity.
Absolutely. Deep stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Our sources are excerpts from biblical prophecy and spiritual cycles, and also some answered question. And they offer these really unique commentaries, especially on the revelation of John.
Right. And also, as you said, material on spiritual cycles, true felicity.
So our mission really is to unpack these ideas, pull out some surprising bits of wisdom, and maybe see how this ancient insight can give us a fresh perspective on, well, our lives today.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So, kicking things off, these sources have a pretty striking way of reinterpreting some of Revelation's, really vivid images, like the Holy City or New Jerusalem.
Yeah.
It's not described as a literal city, not at all. It's explained as the religion of God.
Interesting. So symbolic.
Very. And the new heaven and new earth. That's interpreted as the outward parts of the former religion passing away. Its old forms, its structures.
Okay, making way for the new.
Exactly. And its teachings then spread, throughout the earth until basically all mankind gets it. And that bit about no more sea, that apparently symbolizes no unpeopled land left. Like, the message has reached everywhere.
What's really fascinating there is how clearly that shifts the focus.
Yeah.
It moves us away from thinking about, literal buildings, stone and mortar,
Right,
to spiritual realities.
Yeah.
And it clarifies this. New Jerusalem isn't physical, but it's the religion of God which descends from heaven and is described as new. It really elevates the whole thing, I think.
Yeah.
Changes how you might even read other sacred texts.
That reframing definitely gives those images a whole new layer. And speaking of images, Revelation also has that bit about a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Powerful stuff.
Oh, yeah.
How does the source explain that one?
Well, the commentary explains this woman as representing the religion of God that descended upon Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, founder of Islam, for clarity.
Okay.
And the symbolism gets quite specific. The sun she's clothed with and the moon under her feet. They're seen as the two big governments under that religion's shadow, the Persian and the Ottoman.
Because of their emblems, the sun and crescent.
Exactly. And the 12 stars. Those are interpreted as the 12 imams, significant spiritual leaders in Shia Islam, who were the promoters of Muhammad's religion, the educators, like guiding stars.
Wow, that's a very specific correlation. Okay, then there's the dragon. Revelation says, "And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns." What's the take on this big red dragon?
Yeah, this dragon is identified with the Umayyads. That was an early Islamic dynasty. And their rule, well, it brought some major shifts politically and spiritually.
Okay, so historical figures again.
Right. And the symbolism keeps going. The 7 heads and 7 crowns are interpreted as the 7 major dominions they ruled over. It was a huge area: Syria, Persia, Arabia, Egypt, North Africa, like Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, then Spain, which was Andalusia, and even the Turkish tribes up in Transoxania.
That's a lot of heads.
It is. And the 10 horns, they represent 10 sovereigns, or maybe 10 names of rulers, names like Abu Sufyan, Marwan. The text even notes repetitions, like 2 Muawiyahs, 3 Yazids. And importantly, the source states the Umayyads destroyed a third of the holy and sanctified souls who descended from the pure lineage of Muhammad. So it points to real conflict and persecution.
Tying symbolism to specific history, specific impacts. It makes it feel very grounded, despite the imagery. The prophecy then talks about the woman being with child and the dragon trying to devour her child. What about this offspring or man-child?
This offspring, this glorious son, is interpreted as the Bab, the primal point. He's a foundational figure for a new spiritual era. And the text says he was in truth born from the religion of Muhammad. And that bit about the child being caught up into God and to his throne, that's seen as a prophecy about the Bab who ascended to the kingdom, the throne of God, signifying, his spiritual elevation, safe from the dragon.
Fascinating link. And then the woman fled into the wilderness. How's that interpreted?
That's seen as the religion of God betook itself to the desert, specifically the vast desert of Hijaz and the Arabian Peninsula, which became its sort of focal point.
Right.
And here's where the timing gets really critical. It says that they should feed her there 1,203 score days.
Which isn't literal days, right.
Exactly. The text clarifies, according to the terminology of the Bible, these 12,260 days mean 12,260 years.
Wow.
So the emphasis is, for 12,260 years, this religion was nurtured in the Arabian desert until the promised one appeared. And the truly remarkable part, the Bab's appearance is noted as AH 1260.
Which corresponds to?
1844 in the Gregorian calendar. It lines up precisely with that 12,260-year time frame.
That is remarkable precision.
It really is. It kind of raises the question, how often do we actually see such detailed prophecies spanning different texts and times, aligning so perfectly with events?
Yeah, that level of detail is astonishing. It also sort of brings to mind that human tendency we sometimes have, to challenge, dispute, and deny the obvious when something new doesn't quite fit what we expect. The source mentions the Pharisees in the time of Christ, how they'd obstinately deny interpretations and willfully obscure the truth because they were stuck on literal conditions.
Right, clinging to specifics.
So what does that historical pattern maybe suggest about how we approach prophecy or even just new ideas today? Are we maybe still prone to those same biases, you think?
It's a very relevant question, isn't it?
Definitely something to consider. Okay, so this idea of precise timing, recurring patterns, it leads us really nicely into the next big concept, these material and spiritual cycles. Our sources use this really powerful analogy comparing the seasons in nature to the spiritual cycles associated with the prophets of God. Can you walk us through that comparison?
Absolutely. It's quite beautiful, actually. The source starts with the natural seasons. You have spring renewal, right? Life-giving zephyrs, everything coming alive, a fresh start.
Okay.
Then summer, that's growth, fullness of power. The harvest time when things reach fruition.
Send it in.
Then autumn comes. That's decline. Unwholesome gales, things start to wither, dearth and want. And finally, winter. Cold winds, everything seems dormant, lethargy, plants look dead. But, and this is, spring always comes back. It's cyclical.
Right, that constant renewal. So how does that beautiful natural cycle mirror the spiritual cycles in history?
Well, it maps almost perfectly. The advent of the holy manifestations when divine messengers appear, that's the spiritual springtime. It brings divine splendor, the breeze of life, spirits are revived, there's progress, a kind of resurrection of human potential.
A spiritual rebirth.
Exactly. That leads into the spiritual summer. The word of God is proclaimed, laws are set out, things reach a kind of perfection, the teachings spread, the sun of truth shines.
Peak growth.
Right. But then comes spiritual autumn. Growth and development are arrested, the spiritual energy fades, qualities decay, virtues might even become vices. The original law becomes just a name, really.
You're using its spirit.
Precisely. And that leads to spiritual winter. And ignorance and unawareness covers everything. Darkness of wayward and selfish desires takes over. It's described as a kind of perpetual death, a spiritual stagnation.
Bleak.
Sounds it at. But just like nature, the cycle continues. After that winter, the spiritual springtime returns again, and a new cycle reveals its splendor. New life, new guidance.
It's such a clear, potent comparison, and the source takes this further with the analogy of the sun of truth and its different dawning points. What's the difference between being lovers of the sun and being enamored with the zodiacal signs?
This is such a critical point. It gets to the heart of how we approach truth. The source says the sun of truth, that essential divine reality is like the physical sun. It rises from different points on the horizon at different times.
Like through Abraham, then Moses, then Christ.
Exactly. Different dawning points. But crucially, the sun is but one sun and one single reality. So those with true knowledge are lovers of the sun itself. They love the light, the truth, no matter which dawning point, which messenger brings it.
They're focused on the essence.
Right. But the foolish and the ignorant, as the text puts it, they get enamored with the zodiacal signs, meaning the specific dawning point they know. They get attached to, say, only Moses or only Christ.
And then they miss the sunrise when it happens somewhere else.
Precisely. They deprive themselves of the rays of the sun when once it had moved to a new dawning point. Connecting this to the bigger picture, it's really about being open to truth in whatever form it appears, whenever it appears, not getting stuck in the past.
So it's about seeking the truth itself, being enraptured, as the source says, with any soul where you find it. I love those analogies. It uses the moth loving the light in any lamp and the nightingale loving the rose in any garden.
Exactly. The essence transcends the specific form or time.
Yeah, that really clarifies it. Okay, let's pivot now to our final section, this concept of true felicity. The source starts, interestingly, by defining felicity, happiness, fulfillment for the lower kingdoms first. Minerals, plants, animals.
It does. It sort of builds a foundation. For the mineral world, its happiness is basically the earth becoming fertile, green and verdant from rain, producing plants and fruits, fulfilling its potential to support life.
Okay.
For a plant, say a tree, its initial success is growing tall, bearing fruit. But its real felicity, the text says, is progressing into the animal and human worlds, becoming part of them, replacing what they've consumed, contributing upward.
Interesting. And for animals?
Well, their basic felicity is having, perfect members, organs, powers, their needs met, good food, water, environment, like a bird thriving. But again, its true felicity is seen as passing from the animal world into the human realm, maybe as microscopic beings in air or water that get assimilated, becoming part of human life.
So for each lower kingdom, the highest happiness involves contributing to or becoming part of the next level up.
That seems to be the idea.
And the source notes that for minerals, plants, animals, material ease, comfort, and abundance really are the height of their felicity. It even jokes about the wealth of a bird having whole fields and mountains.
Right, compared to even the wealthiest person.
So if material comfort is the peak for, say, an animal, what does that imply for us, for human felicity? It can't be just that, right?
Exactly. It implies quite clearly that the honor and exaltation of man cannot reside solely in material delights and earthly benefits. For humans, those things are wholly secondary.
So our true happiness lies elsewhere.
Yes. The text states that human exaltation resides primarily in such virtues and attainments as are the adornments of the human reality. Our true happiness has to come from something deeper, something uniquely human.
That's a powerful distinction. So if it's not just material stuff, what are those virtues and attainments? What does this true felicity actually look like for people?
It's quite a list, actually. It includes things like divine blessings, heavenly bounties, heartfelt emotions, the love and knowledge of God, but also practical things like the education of the people, the perceptions of the mind, and the discoveries of science.
So spiritual and intellectual.
And moral, too. Foundational virtues like justice and equity, truthfulness and benevolence, inner courage and innate humanity, safeguarding the rights of others, keeping agreements, and it continues. Rectitude of conduct under all circumstances, love of truth under all conditions, self-abnegation for the good of all people, kindness and compassion for all nations. Also, obedience to the teachings of God, service to the heavenly kingdom, guidance for all mankind, and education for all races and nations. Well, it's a very holistic picture of human flourishing.
That's an incredible blueprint for a meaningful life. And the source adds something crucial. These gifts do not manifest themselves, save through a celestial and divine power and through the heavenly teachings, for they require a supernatural power.
Right.
So if these virtues need this higher power, this divine assistance, what does that mean for how we actually cultivate them in our own lives for the world?
Well, it signifies that this is the true felicity of the human world. This is eternal life and heavenly honor. The core message seems to be that since, as the text beautifully puts it, the compassionate Lord has crowned the head of man with such a refulgent diadem, this amazing spiritual potential, then we must strive that its luminous gems may cast their light upon the whole world.
So it's about realizing that potential within us.
Exactly. Manifesting these divine qualities, these virtues, and then letting that light radiate outwards to benefit everyone.
Wow. Okay, what a journey we've taken in this deep dive. Seriously, from those fresh interpretations of Revelation's prophecies to that really powerful analogy of spiritual cycles like seasons, and then landing on this profound redefinition of true human happiness.
Yeah, I think the thread running through it all is this call to look deeper, beyond just the surface interpretations, seeing the recurring patterns of guidance and realizing that real fulfillment for humans isn't about just accumulating stuff.
Right.
It's about cultivating these spiritual and moral virtues, which, raises a pretty important question for us day to day.
Yeah.
How can really embracing these deeper ideas actually transform our decisions, our priorities, shift our focus maybe?
Yeah, from the fleeting to the truly enduring. That's a great question. And maybe for you, our listener, here's a final thought to kind of mull over. Given this cyclical nature of spiritual reality we talked about and that idea of loving the sun over its dawning point, how might you recognize and maybe even embrace new sources of guidance, new knowledge, even if they show up in unexpected ways or places to really fulfill your own potential for that true human felicity we discussed? Something to think about.